All right, welcome back everyone to another deep dive. For anyone out there getting ready for the UPSC, especially that international relations optional, well, today's episode's really for you.
You got that right.
It's tough,
Yeah.
but to really get it, you gotta go deep. You can't just know what's happening in the world right now.
You got to understand the deep roots.
Yeah, the foundations of political thought. And that's why today, we're traveling back in time, way back, over 2,000 years, to hang out with, well, Aristotle.
Aristotle. Now, I know what you're thinking. Ancient Greece.
Yeah.
What's that got to do with international relations today?
Right.
But let me tell you, this guy, he wasn't just some philosopher. He was like the philosopher. The original polymath. Aristotle wrote about everything. I mean, everything. Biology, physics, ethics, you name it.
Magnets.
Magnets. Even magnets.
Metaphysics.
Oh, tons of metaphysics. Of course, he wrote about politics, too. A lot about politics.
And here's the thing. Even today, walk into any political science department, anywhere in the world, and you know what they're still talking about.
Aristotle.
Aristotle. This guy's work, it's still the foundation. His ideas about power, about states, about governing, timeless.
Timeless is the word. And one of the things that really sets Aristotle apart is how practical he was. He wasn't like his teacher, Plato, always going on about these perfect ideal states, utopias.
Right.
Aristotle was all about studying the real world, how political systems actually worked, on the ground.
And the guy was thorough. Get this. He studied, are you ready for this? 158 constitutions.
158.
158 constitutions. Can you imagine the research? No internet, no libraries, just scrolls, word of mouth.
Right.
I mean, that's dedication.
It's incredible. And from all those constitutions, he was able to pull out these incredible insights, like what makes a government stable, what causes instability.
And that's stuff we still look at today.
Right.
When we analyze different countries, nation states, we're using those same tools, that comparative approach. It's fundamental to IR, even now.
It is. And it leads us to one of Aristotle's, one of his big focuses, the polis, the Greek city-state. But there's a bit of irony here, right?
Oh, yeah.
The city-state, I mean, it was already kind of on its way out in Aristotle's own time.
Right. Like, hello, Alexander the Great.
Exactly. His own student out there conquering massive territories, building an empire, like way beyond the little city-state.
So Aristotle's focusing on the polis is, like, already out of date. Is that a problem?
It's actually kind of brilliant. It forces us to think, okay, how do we take these ideas and apply them to the world we live in, a world of nation states, a globalized world? What works? What needs to be rethought?
Yeah, that's the kind of analysis UPSC examiners love.
Yeah.
That critical thinking, not just spitting back facts, showing you could really grapple with these ideas, apply them.
Exactly. And speaking of grappling with ideas, we got to talk about Aristotle's views on, on the big stuff, power, people, happiness. Like, what's the point of government anyway?
So for Aristotle, the whole point of the state, it was to help people achieve happiness.
Happiness. But hold on, his idea of happiness, it's not what we might think of today, just feeling good.
Right, right.
This was about living a virtuous life, reaching your full potential, and doing that as part of society.
So less about me, and more about contributing to the community, being a good citizen. It almost sounds like a very early version of those sustainable development goals.
Interesting connection.
Like well-being is about more than just money. It's social, environmental, the whole picture. It's about creating a society where people can actually flourish.
That's a great point. And that's where his idea of politics being the master science comes in. Aristotle believed politics, it shapes everything because it's how we organize our lives together. The framework for how we interact, our institutions, our values, all of it flows from how we do politics.
He's saying politics isn't just some abstract thing. It's the bedrock. It's how we build a society, how we live together.
And when you think about international relations, it makes perfect sense. The choices governments make, treaties, wars, all of it, it ripples out. It affects everything from trade to security to culture.
It's all connected. And to really get those connections, got to go back to the basics.
Yeah.
Thinkers like Aristotle.
It's foundational stuff, really. And that's what makes this whole political philosophy thing so important, especially if you're thinking about, diplomacy, international relations as a career.
It's like a cheat code.
Yeah.
Speaking of diplomats, wasn't Aristotle kind of a diplomat himself in a way? I mean, the guy was Alexander the Great's tutor.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine shaping the mind of a future emperor.
Talk about pressure.
Right.
And actually, their relationship, it wasn't all sunshine and roses. They had a big falling out later on. over politics, of course.
No way. Really? What happened?
Well, it involved one of Aristotle's close friends, this philosopher named Callisthenes. He was pretty critical of Alexander, how he was ruling. Yeah. Callisthenes thought Alexander was becoming a little too much like those Persian kings he'd conquered, adopting their customs, their whole style of government.
I mean, that's got to be a risky thing to say to a guy like Alexander the Great.
It was. And tragically, Callisthenes ended up imprisoned, died under, well, mysterious circumstances.
That's intense.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that even the brightest minds, they weren't immune to the dangers of politics.
Yeah. Real stakes, real consequences.
It makes Aristotle seem, I don't know, more human. He wasn't just this detached intellectual, He was living through this crazy time dealing with these tough situations.
For sure. And understanding that context, the world he lived in, it helps us get his ideas on a deeper level. It wasn't just theory for him, it was real life.
So, all right, for our listeners out there, the UPSC folks, especially those going for the IR optional, what are the big takeaways from all this Aristotle stuff? How can they actually use it to understand international relations better and, maybe ace those exams?
Okay, good question. Let's see. If we're talking Aristotle for diplomats, 3 big things come to mind. And they're all super relevant for that IR optional.
Okay, lay it on us.
First, the comparative approach. This is huge. To really understand a political system, any system, you got to compare it to others. What's similar, what's different, and why? History, culture, all of it matters.
So, like, if you're trying to make sense of, say, India and China, you can't do it in a vacuum.
Exactly. You got to understand how each country's system works, how it got that way, their values. It's all connected.
And that's where Aristotle's obsession with constitutions comes in handy there.
Big time. It gives us a framework for thinking about these complex relationships. All right, takeaway number 2.
Hit me.
Focus on real-world conditions. Aristotle, he wasn't into utopian fantasies. He wanted to know how power actually works, how people behave, what makes a society successful, or what makes it fall apart in the real world.
Right, so no rose-colored glasses.
Nope. It's about looking beyond the theories and getting down to the nitty-gritty. That's key for anyone in diplomacy or policymaking. Okay, and finally, takeaway number 3.
All right, last one.
Power dynamics. This was a big deal for Aristotle. Who has the power? How'd they get it? What are they doing with it?
Yeah, and how does it all play out?
These questions, they're as relevant today as they were back then.
Maybe even more so.
Especially in international relations. By studying how different systems have handled these questions, well, we get clues about the challenges we face today, and maybe even some ideas for how to deal with them.
So for anyone listening who's thinking, okay, I'm sold, time to get some Aristotle in my life, where do they even start?
Well, his most famous work on politics, it's called, you guessed it, Politics.
Straight to the point.
It's a must-read for anyone serious about political thought. It can be a little dense at times, but there are tons of guides and commentaries out there to help.
I think anyone tackling the UPSC is used to dense reading by now.
Probably. But the point is, don't just memorize it. Engage with it. Think about how it applies to today's world. Where it falls short, what new insights you can get from it. That's how you turn knowledge into wisdom.
That's what makes studying the classics so cool, right? It's like this conversation that's been going on for centuries, and you get to jump in. All right, before we let everyone go, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought, something to chew on. Imagine Aristotle here in the 21st century. What would he make of it all? The nation-state system, I mean, the whole thing. Global warming, nuclear weapons, artificial intelligence.
Whoa. Yeah, it's mind-blowing, isn't it, to think how someone from ancient Greece would see our world so connected, so technologically advanced.
I bet he'd have a lot to say about the internet.
Oh, for sure. But I think more than anything, he'd remind us that a lot of the really big questions haven't changed all that much.
You mean about power, about justice, about living a good life?
Yeah. Those things, they're still at the heart of it all.
So the way we do things is different, but the fundamental questions, they're still the same.
Exactly. And that's why political philosophy, why it matters so much. It gives us this, framework to understand those big questions and to come up with new solutions to all the new problems we're facing.
It's about taking the wisdom of the past and using it to navigate the present and maybe even create a better future.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, folks, that just about wraps up our deep dive into the world of Aristotle.
Hopefully we've convinced you that this guy, even after all these centuries, he's still got a lot to teach us about international relations.
And hey, for all our listeners out there getting ready for the UPSC, especially that IR optional, this stuff's gold.
Pure gold.
But remember, it's not just about passing an exam. It's about really getting it. understanding how the world works, what makes it tick, and what role you want to play in it all.
Whether you end up as a diplomat, a policy wonk, or just a citizen who cares about what's going on in the world, these are the ideas that matter.
So keep those minds sharp, stay curious, and never stop asking those big Aristotle-inspired questions. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, you know the drill. Hit that subscribe button, leave us a comment, share it with your friends, your study buddies, anyone who might find it useful.
We love hearing from you all.
It keeps us going. And hey, good luck out there with all your studies, your future diplomatic careers. You got this.
We'll see you next time on another deep dive.